do it live. Okay. We'll do it live.
Drop the mic with Jason Hunt.
Back to any of them because they all have that preamble. I'll put it on and then I'll scroll over to like 7 minutes in. It's like, is this guy done setting it up yet? When are we going to start?
Right.
And the introduction to my book is like that. I'm like, what's the introduction for?
Yeah.
Like, is the book starting? So I think when I put in my book, the introduction is like, okay, the book is starting now. Get ready.
I used to do like originally when I started the podcast, I would have like these long intros, just like explaining, like basically their LinkedIn profile. I would just like regurgitate at the beginning of the podcast. But I just found myself when I listen to podcasts too, I'm scrolling past that. Fast forward 10 seconds. I just want to get to the meat of the conversation. Right.
Yeah.
And I think for the format for why podcast episodes or podcast programs like the Joe Rogan are so attractive for listeners is because you really get to hear somebody and understand somebody, when they kind of let their guard down, which usually happens around like almost like the 1 hour mark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they hit that and they just you get to really know who they are and they kind of lose the mask,
Yeah. I grew up, well, most of us I think did, in this era where we were only fed little bite-sized bits, whether it's a guest on a morning radio show where you've literally got 2 minutes, or you're on a late night talk show where you've got maybe 7 or 8, or a afternoon talk show. You can't get a real sense of somebody. So it all ends up kind of coming out somewhat canned and polished. And I'm with you. I'm the kind of person that I'll gobble through a 3-hour conversation, but I do it in little bits and bites. I'm forever have my earbuds in. If I'm taking out the garbage, if I'm fixing dinner while I'm in the car, and just drop in and out of the conversation. I love that. It's part of why I started my career in radio. I don't know if you knew that, Jay, and I was really good at it, but I was bored with it really quick. And I think that reverse engineering it, knowing what I know now, I just wasn't as interested in all that stuff. I didn't know that I would be interested in just you're really getting a sense of a person and what's real and having good, meaty, meaningful conversations. The podcast era has since caught up with us and showed me what I liked and I guess what I didn't like about the start of my career.
Tell me a bit about your radio experience. When did you get into that? Did you work for a local station?
Depends on what's local. I started my career in Sarnia. I live in London and I commuted between London and Sarnia for about 6 years. So I mean, my interest in that started from when I was a little kid. I didn't carry around a teddy bear. I had a little transistor radio about the size of a brick that my grandpa gave me. And I used to listen to the Detroit Tigers games coming in off the over the airways of the great voice of the Great Lakes 760 WJR, Ernie Harwell. And so when I was in, public school, I won the speaking. Remember how you used to do like the speaking contests in grade 4 and 5? I won those and I knew I was good at that kind of stuff. I was the valedictorian in grade 8. So I guess I've been in love with the sound of my own voice for a lot longer than I would care to admit. Went to a high school that has a radio and TV arts program. So I knew even from that time that I wanted to get into that. And then went to post-secondary for radio and was working part-time at some stations in Sarnia before I even graduated. And like I said, I was pretty good at that, but had that itch for something different and kind of got pulled in some other directions. And now here I am talking to you.
So it's interesting what the paths that lead us to where, kind of where we are today. And, for me, I had a band. I was always into music, aspired to be, originally I wanted to go to university to be a music video director and didn't go that route, thankfully. But I got into music and I also got into radio. I was doing volunteer work at the University of Guelph at their radio station for similar reasons. I just liked having a lot of ears listening to what I had to say, and my thoughts on certain things, but how that kind of transcends to speaking in front of audiences where we got to know each other well is through our speaking experiences. And maybe you can chime in on your journey from going from radio to speaking.
One of the things that was pivotal, how's this for a left turn, was auto racing. when I was rising through the ranks, initially starting my radio career, and you're looking for any opportunity to get on the air more that you can, the stations that I was working for started this local hour once a week covering local auto racing. And they had a sales rep that knew a lot about this stuff, but he didn't have any on-air experience. So they came to me and they said, we want somebody that can announce this. And frankly, I was the junior guy on the totem pole. So I think they knew I was going to say yes to whatever they threw at me. Will you co-host this with this guy? Because we think we can sell sponsorship to it, was essentially it. And at that time, this is 1998, Jay, I had heard of Dale Earnhardt. And I think, I'd watched a few Indy races with my dad when I was growing up. But I was young and full of P&V, and I wasn't afraid of what I didn't know. So I said, sure, I figured I could figure out the rest. And we had that bloody show sold out for the season sponsorship before we ever did a show. And it stayed like that for 5 or 6 years. And doing that show led to me getting hired as a track announcer at a place called Delaware Speedway, which is a half-mile NASCAR-style stock car track just outside London. And so I was doing that for a while, and then I eventually was hired as their sales and marketing director. That's what I left radio for, was to go do that. Next thing I knew, I was the general manager. There's a whole story all in that arc. But what that did was the announcing. I actually remember I was still working at CHOK Radio in Sarnia because that was my full-time job. And I'd started a sole proprietorship, Kevin Bulmer Enterprises, because I was doing the part-time announcing at the racetrack. I was writing a column for Inside Track Motorsport News magazine. I was writing a local newspaper column. So I started this sole proprietorship to bill and invoice that outside work. And Jay, I remember sitting behind the control board at CHK Radio and thinking, I'm going to use this business that I've registered to be a speaker. And this is 1999 at this point. And right immediately behind that thought came the next one, which was, well, that's great. You're good at talking, but you're just a punk kid. You haven't done anything yet. Who's going to want to listen to you? Now, I didn't know at that point in my life what a limiting belief was, but I think I knew as early as that point, that's what I really wanted to do. But I shelved it and went on to do some other different things. But I think by the time I finally got around to kicking myself in the behind to get on stage in an environment like where we connected, I was much more well-formed than I would have otherwise had been because of just hours and hours and hours of thinking and talking on your feet, essentially doing live play-by-play for auto racing, hosting more banquets and conferences and functions, emceeing more things than I could remember, the radio and the broadcasting training, and then all that kind of coming together to make me a bit of a unique creature, I think, in that regard. And those are only a couple of the ingredients in the recipe.
But, I think those are some key ingredients to building a great personal brand, which a lot of people are obviously striving towards now, is building the personal brand. In my opinion, I think personal branding is going to be more and more prevalent in years to come with more and more with AI revolutionizing the way we do things.
Yeah.
What else are we going to have left when all the monotonous and tedious tasks are taken care of from AI? We're going to have our personal branding at the end of the day. So you've got a jump start over pretty much everyone else, but you must get a lot of people reaching out to you because of the nature of what you speak about, what you speak on, asking you about how to build their own personal brand. Do you have any, what are some tips to the people out there that maybe are entrepreneurs, business owners, have established businesses? Where do they get started with building that personal brand?
I believe people still relate to people. I think AI is an incredible tool that we've only just barely begun to realize the advantages of. But if you're asking it something like, who am I and what do I stand for, then it's just going to loop you in circles and give you some version of what's already out there. And so when you say something to someone like, be yourself, or live authentically or whatever, that all sounds good. But what does it mean? I mean, I found it to be a real journey just to kind of understand who I am, what I stand for, who I'm not, which is also part of the equation, especially in business and branding. It's really easy to get pulled into that comparison trap and believing that you need to just parrot some version of what's already been successful for someone else. And so I think it's really interesting to dive into some of that stuff for business and for your own well-being, to really understand yourself at a deep level. One of the things I like to say to people, for a long time, it seemed like every conversation I had, somebody was throwing Simon Sinek's "Start with Why" at me, that they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he's got this framework in the book called Sinek's Golden Circle, where when it comes to marketing messaging, that we maybe talk about what we do, our product or service. Fewer still talk about how we do it, maybe a testimonial or some sort of proprietary system, that kind of a thing that we think differentiates it. And Sinek would say where the meat is to go a level beyond that and to share why you do what you do, which I agree with. But I always say, go one level beyond that and share with me who you are. Because when you do that, the what, the how, and the why is all just going to come with that as a consequence. But what I find is that a lot of us either aren't really clear on who that is, or we don't think it's professional enough, or we don't think someone would care. Take a real estate agent, for instance. What does real estate social media look like? You automatically get an image in your mind of the open houses that just listed, the sold, and the market stats that I know the rest of us in the general population can't wait to wake up at the first of the month and check those market stats, right?
Yep.
That's a part of what you need to do in that particular business. But if I'm choosing to do business with you, am I choosing how pretty your graphic is for the stats, or my relationship with the listing? Or is it because I might see something in common that I have with you? Personality traits, character traits, values. Maybe you speak a different language. And I have felt for a long time, going back into my radio days, and part of the story that I left out was after my life completely fell apart post racetrack. And then I went back into radio, but on the sales end of things. And so I got to work with all kinds of small to mid-sized businesses on their radio and their digital campaigns, and just found that most of us just don't know what to say. That the challenge with the message is kind of universal, but that we relate to people. And I think for the great majority of us, unless our entire business hinges on a product, the differentiating factor is probably staring back at you in the mirror, but we don't necessarily know exactly how to harness that, or why someone would care, but that's where it's really fun. I found is to really dive into what makes somebody tick. Like, why do you do this? You keep waking up every morning and you keep coming back to the salt mine, so to speak. Why? Yeah. Where did it come from? And there's a lot of meat on that bone.
It does. You touch on some things that beg the question. I just want to take the example of a real estate agent for a moment. Because I get this question asked a lot. It's like, you know what? I'm a real estate agent and I have my real estate brand and my personal presence as well, which has family stuff. I'm a Leafs fan, so it has a lot of hockey stuff on. How do you blend the two, and do you blend the two, or do you keep them very separate when you're building your presence?
We've worked with several people in real estate, and I would never say not to do the things that you need to do to show your ability and your competency at your craft, like some of the examples that I've given already, but mix in some of the other stuff. So for instance, when we do what we call at NSM Brand Media content shoot, as an example, we would take the person. I'm in London, so I'll use this city as an example. Is there an area here that you feel strongly about it that you specialize in? Okay, well, the east side of the city. Okay, great. And we would tell them, bring 2 or 3 different changes of clothes. And we'd run them around to 4 or 5 different spots that we've predetermined, and just catch all kinds of different candid photos. And I'd ask a lot of different questions and capture that on video. And after just 2 or 3 hours together, you come away with months worth of content, of candid photos, of little video snippets that are really organic. Because I feel like we can, more than ever, you can tell when a sales pitch is coming. So when, if somebody just snaps a picture of you and me smiling and having a laugh now and share that, as an image, as a post for either one of us, that's going to get more organic reach and engagement than if I look straight into the camera and said, "Hi, I'm Kevin Bulmer from NSM Brand Media, and for the last 5 years, we've been offering the best in price, quality." It's like stuff that sounds like marketing, right?
Mhm.
And what happens, Jay, is it short circuits people.
Are you getting traffic to your business's website, but it's not converting into sales the way you would like? You need to turn those conversations into customers. Introducing Chitello.ai. Chitello isn't just another AI agent. It's a custom-built AI that understands your business inside and out, delivering 24/7 support to your customers and your clients. Go over to Chitello.ai and request a demo today. Chitello.ai provides instant, human-like live support, instant answers 24/7, customizable support, insights and analytics, accurate responses. Go on over to Chitello.ai and book your demo today.
And what I mean is that, say I'm asking the subject, the client, in this case, we were talking about a real estate agent. I'm asking them a question and I'm recording their answer on a cell phone because I'm trying to get them documentary style. Because I'm just wanting, like we were talking before we came on here, I want to feel as if I've just dropped into the middle of a conversation because it's relatable. Once you turn your attention to the camera and you start trying to sound perfect and sell me, I can sense the sales pitch. So maybe I'm recording something like that and I'll say something to get that person to laugh. Our photographer will capture that moment. We share that photo in the mix of all of the other stuff. And it always, that kind of a thing, reaches more people and gets far more engagement. And the people, the clients, the subject matters, they'll argue with us even after they see the results. They'll go, "But my hair is out of place," or "My shirt's not tucked in," or something like that. And we're like, "But nobody cares. You're the only one who notices that." That if you meet with a client, they're meeting with you, or if you're on a Zoom call even, it's not airbrushed. It's not photoshopped. You don't have a filter. You're just you, and we already like you. So just show a little bit more of that, but do it strategically. And over and over again, we've seen how that can really raise the tide and be a successful part of a social media mix. But it's almost more of a personal thing where you've got to get over, whether you want to call it imposter syndrome or insecurity or comparison trap or any of that. But
I think it's easy to overcome a lot of that with just the repetition, just doing it, posting it, whatever it is. I mean, I'm in the middle right now since the new year. My new thing was a YouTube video per business day for the rest of the year.
Oh, wow.
So go home, sticking to it. It's not easy.
No, I mean, man, how's it going?
Easy. I mean, it's going good. Haven't missed a day yet. Right. And but really, like, some of them, they're not perfect. Like they're not perfect. Like I have my editors that fix it. But if I go through one of the videos before publishing and it's a little minor thing that needs to be fixed, maybe there's an or an that they missed, I'm not going to tell them to cut it. I'm just get it out there, push it, get it out there. Let's see how it does. Yeah. Sometimes you'd be surprised how many times I put something out there that maybe I didn't like the way I looked or my hair was or something like that. And it ended up performing really, really well. Right. So you never really know what the algorithms are or how they're going to treat you or how they're going to prefer something over something else. Right. Beautiful mistakes.
It's funny. I left my YouTube largely alone for longer than I care to admit. And late last summer, early fall, I guess, I started posting some shorts again, just to, again, start building myself back up as a speaker and whatnot. And I'm no different than anyone else. I'm sitting there thinking, does the internet really need another middle-aged guy just talking into the camera? And I thought, well, I've got my own thoughts based on my own experiences. I'll share them. If somebody cares, great. If they don't, that's also great because there are lots of other voices out there. But then I would also mix in some other stuff that I think looks better because it would maybe have some B-roll of related images and maybe my voice over the subtitles with the related B-roll that I think looks better. And yet after doing several months of this, it's not even close that the stuff where I show up and it's a human face speaking always does better than the other stuff that I think, frankly, looks better and is more interesting. But there again, you've got to be able to distance yourself from that end of it, and sometimes put your own personal bias aside, even, and maybe especially when those biases are coming because you're beating yourself up a bit.
100%. And the fact of the matter is, even the organic stuff you post on social media is not going to reach a huge audience anyway. And they actually have a new feature on, for those people that are maybe a little hesitant to post content on their Instagram, there's a new function where you can trial. You can actually trial. You hit a little toggle there before publishing that says trial. And what that means, what it's going to do is it's going to post that content out there to the general population, but nobody that follows you. So if you're afraid of putting out a piece of content because your friends or clients are following you and you're afraid what they might think, it'll put it out there to the people first and then give you that data so you know whether or not to publish it to your own following. So which is great. But at the end of the day, I mean, I personally think it's just a matter of just getting it out there, even just for the insights that you're going to get is almost more valuable than caring whether or not people like it or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like, for example, the videos I've done, I think I'm at, how many videos I'm at now? Probably like 30 for the year so far. And it's interesting to see the feedback in terms of what video actually gets the most organic reach. And it's a random video on me, like basically promoting some new AI tool I found. So that gives me more insight to be like, hey, look, I got to create more videos around AI tools because that's what the algorithms and what people want to see.
I love that you've challenged yourself to do that. I know one other person that did that, and he found that year to be a bit of a strain. That's not a very good motivational speech for you, but it's a lofty goal. It sounds easy to say.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually went to a mastermind in London, England. And I was at that mastermind, and it was one of the guys in the group, a guy named Bart from the Netherlands, who inspired me to do this because he said, I did it I told myself I'm going to do a video a day for a year. And he did it every day for a year. He said it was the greatest and worst thing he ever decided to do because the amount of time commitment to it is insane. Especially if the trick is to batch the content. Don't do one a day. You know what I mean? Make sure you're doing a batch maybe once a week. You do like 7 videos or something like that. But he committed himself to it. But he also gained so much good insight in terms of what worked. He got some videos. He was shocked at the videos that got 10,000 views. It was those videos that were speaking specifically to a very, very niche audience. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like plumbing digital marketing tips. And this one would get 10,000 views. Where the generic video speaking to everybody was really speaking to nobody and reached nobody, So,
yeah.
So, I was just going to say, Kevin, I think it's important for anybody out there. Just, you got to pick something, set yourself a goal, say you're going to do it, and just flip and do it,
Yeah. I think with so many things in life, the next steps begin to show themselves to you, but only after you start walking the road. It's you start running and the road in front of you appears. And I find that it's amazing, whether it's with coming up with other different video subject ideas or marketing strategies, or if it's business development, who you're calling. It just, the more you do of that, the more other ideas come in, or the more you sharpen your focus on maybe what that target market or that target approach is. But you've got to start somewhere, right? And you can only start where you are. But getting in there and going, I remember, Jay, I've got a son. Well, I've got 2 of them. One's like your 3 kids who's all wrapped up in hockey. The other started teaching himself video editing and digital animation when he was about 13 years old. He's now 22, and he just hit over 200,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel that he does these animated rap battles. And he's making more from that YouTube channel than I paid myself for my own business last year, and good for him. But I remember when he started, when he was 13 or 14, and the comments that he was getting were things like, this gave me cancer, this is horrible, whatever else. And I remember thinking, man, people could be really cruel. Like, I don't know that I want to deal with that. But he knew what he wanted to do, and he just powered through it. It was because he was kind of inspiring me at the time that I decided I needed to get out there and speak. That and he and I discuss this every so often, that I remember telling him, you're kicking my butt creatively. I've got to get out there and start doing it. And so I forced myself to start coming up with these video blogs, but I was braced for mean comments and things like that. So even though I feel pretty confident in how I present myself, I was still a little bit afraid. I'm only now just at the point where when I get something like that, I actually think it's funny.
Mhm.
And it doesn't happen as much as people would think, but you've got to, there comes a point you have to start doing as opposed to just talking or planning or wishing or wondering or masterminding. You got to cannonball into the deep end.
It's sometimes it's one of those things you have to hold yourself accountable. And I used to do this with Instagram stories I used to do on January 1st. I'd say to myself, I'm doing a story per day for 100 days. And because I put it out there on social media, I not only held myself accountable, but I was accountable to everybody else out there, right? Who expected me to do a story a day because I said I'm going to do 100. And that's one great way to use social media is if you don't have anybody to hold you accountable, use social media to hold you accountable to it. All right. So I never miss a day, 100 days, no matter what the condition outside, minus 40, I'm going outside on my morning run and I'm doing a quick 15-second quote or motivational story or something. And I think that's what, and in your case, I think that's fantastic. You had, your son holding you accountable in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I've got the athlete who, so every time I'm at the gym, Jay, I'm messaging him, yo, bro. So if he calls me dad, I think it's strange now because he's almost 19, but he likes knowing that his dad's, working on that and whatever else. And then the other one on the creative side, we have all kinds of great discussions about branding and marketing and that
You work
kind of.
for you?
No,
Not yet?
I don't know if I see that happening. We'll see. He's just finishing up university for computer sciences, and he never started what he's doing with YouTube to try to make that his vocation. Although he's earning what would be a decent living from that already. But no, he's got his own thing and his own ideas. And what I'm doing with NSM Brand Media and what I aspire to do as I build my own brand and brands, I think it's a little bit different. And I also don't know that I would want to muddy the waters between he and I, but you never know. But we have these great discussions between the two of us just about, how to execute and how to optimize and knowing your audience and just all kinds of fun stuff. And it's pretty neat.
One thing that you speak very well on is the importance of storytelling, right? How important is it for business owners to leverage storytelling in 2025?
To leverage storytelling, I guess it depends on how I'm contextualizing or how I'm perceiving what you mean by storytelling. So I'm evaluating a few things in my mind before I answer that. I guess what I would suggest to anybody in business when they're looking to create any kind of a marketing strategy or a communication strategy is to go through a process that we at NSM Brand Media refer to as a brand story and strategy. So like when you refer to me as a speaker, as you've experienced by having to listen through me a few times, the way that my brain works is very metaphorical. I use did you ever notice this about that, or naming my small business community after the little engine that could, or I got the turtle behind me here because of the tortoise and the hare as a keep. So there's that sort of a storytelling of taking like a story that other people might know and then maybe extracting something out of it. But I'm wondering if you're referring more to what I would consider a brand story. And I feel like that's essentially what a brand is. It's a story, it's a context, or as Karen Post said in her book, Brain Tattoos, a brand is a story embedded in the mind of the market. What is it that what's the story that they're going to tell themselves when they hear or they see your name? And if there isn't anything, that they'll either ignore you or they'll just make it up and probably lump you in with an industry category. So in that sense, I would say that it's critical, whether you want to call it a story or a brand or just your message. There are a lot of questions that I would ask them about, how do you want people to feel when they hear about you or they become aware of you? What do you stand for? Who are some of the others that you admire and that you appreciate? Who are your ideal customers? Where are they? How do they speak? All that's all part of a story, or I guess what we would call a brand strategy. So I guess very long-winded and rambling answer to a pretty simple question. I guess I would say pretty important, depending on what you consider to be a story.
100%. And I was going down the direction of brand storytelling when I asked that question, but no, I appreciate what you said before that. But because do you ever get the question, when it comes to storytelling for a brand, how do you attribute the ROI on storytelling? Can you attribute the ROI on storytelling? Because when a new business is sitting there thinking about the importance of their story versus lead generation on Google, it's an interesting one to look at, especially when you're thinking about, budgeting. I just want business. I don't care about my story. I just want business, and I have a really good offer. You know what I mean? I don't really have much of a story, but I have an offer. And I asked this question because something that's top of mind for me right now is I got a spam lead hit my inbox there yesterday or the other day. And I went and looked at this spam lead. I was just curious. I love just checking out, like, what's their business? What's their platform? What's their website? And all this was some spammy cold business with no story. The website was junk, just with some really engaging offer. And that's all it was. And I just found that very unappealing. So.
Yeah, well, I'm, again, I grew up and had my, so to say, my attention marinated in top of mind awareness. Like, my background was radio. So you take one message, a commercial, and then you amplify it, right? You play the damn thing 1,000 times, and usually not a whole lot of thought or effort went into the craft of that message. There's probably some writer in a room who's taken the bullet points about this business, whatever it is, and then turning it into a little 30-second radio commercial read. Or maybe it's the Yellow Page ad that you renew once a year. I'm dating myself now, but this is kind of what I grew up in. And then the game was just trying to amplify yourself above the rest. And it used to be that if your business got to the point where you had the resources that you could be heard on the radio or seen on a local television station, or occupying a quarter or a half page ad in your local newspaper, that in itself insinuated a certain level of business credibility. They must know what they're doing because I'm hearing them on the radio anymore. But these days, I think the waters are a little murkier, and it's just my personal opinion, but I'm more interested in emotional connection than I am top of mind awareness, because I'm aware of all kinds of businesses that I would just assume would go away out of my awareness. But when there's emotional connection, when you actually care, I think this really carried certain small and mid-sized businesses through the pandemic. Those that had created some kind of emotional connection with a loyal customer base were able to be really resourceful and resilient and creative at other different ways that they had to maneuver their business to go through that. Whereas if you're just, I often say, if the message doesn't connect, the delivery method hardly matters. Meaning that whether it's an Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn post, or a TikTok video, or it's a radio ad, or whatever it might be, if the kinds of people that you're trying to reach don't see themselves in it, don't relate to it, don't care, it doesn't connect, then amplifying it louder isn't going to make it more effective. It's just going to make it more expensive, and it's going to make it noisier and, frankly, more irritating. It's kind of like agonizing over whether I'm going to use UPS or FedEx when the person I'm sending the package to isn't even going to receive the package. So, but I think that's trickier. Like, it was easier back in the day to get your business to a certain point, write the check for a radio campaign or a newspaper ad. The designer or the writer calls you, you give them some bullet points, and then but now Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube and LinkedIn are all asking for something every single friggin' day. But That's why guys like you and I are here
Yeah.
to try to help with that.
It's a great point. And, I love the way you kind of articulated that, how top of funnel is only important if it has a bit of meat to it. Right. And a bit of meat, meaning like a bit of, relationship or emotional connection, which is imperative. And I think a lot of advertising does lack that. I wouldn't say, would you say to somebody looking to invest money into radio as it being a bad investment, or could it be a good investment with other efforts that are complementing that effort?
Oh, I think anything can be a great investment if it's part of that larger brand story. How do the pieces fit?
Mhm.
So I hope I don't sound like I'm beating up on any of those other media. I mean,
Mhm.
I grew up in some of those, but I mean, these things that we're talking about that are the hills that I'll, at least in the current context, be willing to die on as it relates to the NSM Brand Media way of doing things. And when a prospective client comes to us, what are some of the things I need to do and understand? I felt this way when I was in radio. It would astonish me, Jay, that I'd get clients that would just, without even thinking, sign orders for tens of thousands of dollars of worth of airtime, and then I'd have to chase them for something what we would call copy to put in the commercial. And I would often hear things like, "Oh, just come up with something." I'd hear that all the time. I'm like, "Come up with something." Like, so the cart and the horse not only aren't on the same lap here, they're not in the right stadiums here.
Just
Like,
be cool. Just be cool.
yeah, like, and so, but this I think presents an interesting challenge to people who are running their own businesses, and I specifically relate to people in smaller and maybe mid-sized business. I don't get into like agency or enterprise marketing, but the people that are having to be sort of chief dish and bottle washer at their businesses, it's difficult. It's to try to understand all this stuff. It's not that they don't want to. It's just I found that most of us are just trying to keep our lives held together, let alone pull all the levers that we need to run a successful business. So, and I feel personally like, what we call marketing in business, it's just communicating. Like, are we communicating effectively or are we not? And when it comes more over onto the personal side of things, I just feel like most of us don't even understand what we're saying to ourselves
Mm.
and what the implications of that is, let
Mhm.
alone how we're affecting others with the way that we're trying to communicate to them. Like, a lot of us don't even know how to get the words "I love you" out to people that we love because it feels so
Mhm.
some kind of a way. So if that's even anywhere in the hemisphere close to being true, what chance do we have at communicating about our businesses in a really human and genuine and authentic but strategic way? It sounds really easy to do. Oh, be yourself. Be authentic. Um, but I've found through my own life experience that's more of a journey to try to uncover what that is that it would sound like. And then, as we've talked about, it requires some courage, even once you have an
Mm.
understanding of that, to put yourself out there and start making a video a day or doing 100 Instagram stories in 100 days and whatever else. It takes guts to do that. And you and I are talking heads, and it still takes guts for us.
Yeah.
So for people that were like, "Hey, I got into this bookkeeping thing because I like numbers and I don't want to have to deal with people. And now you're telling me to go and do, a live on TikTok."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. It's a good segue actually, because I wanted to hit on one more thing before we finish up here today. And as we talk about, the importance of authenticity and being human and human to human connection and feeling emotions at the same time, as AI becomes more and more prevalent in the things that we do every single day, the challenge for us is going to remain on how to maintain that human connection. And so, how are you using AI in your business now, yourself, your personal life, and where you see it emerging to?
I currently view AI as kind of like we're in a similar vein to the way that I view money. in that I feel like the potential that it has is to be a magnifier. So it's like, what are you magnifying? With money, if you're you're a good and generous person who tries to help other people, having more resources is going to magnify your ability to do more of that. If you've got a really good character, you're going to open up more opportunities for that to become evident to more people, which I think is a good thing. And conversely, if you're the reverse of that, that'll become even more apparent. And with AI, I'm looking at it and am by degrees employing it where I can to try to take more of the tasks away that get in between what I feel I have to share and being able to share it. So there's a lot of work, a lot of levers to pull and administrative stuff or repetitive tasks that it looks like AI is going to be able to really flatten that learning curve and compress that time. And that's exciting. And I think also that if you do know what your voice is, what your story is, who it is you're trying to reach, why they might care, AI is an incredible opportunity to amplify that. If you've got something helpful, something well-meaning, something uplifting that you can share, it's really exciting to think about how you could probably do more of that in less time than it would take to just do a little of it now. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about that. And I've always considered myself a bit of a slow adopter. I remember I was laughing the other day just thinking about how long it took me to get a DVD player. I'm like, why would I get that? I've got these perfectly good VHS tapes. And then I remember when I finally got it, I'm like, man, this is great. Right. Or how long it took me. It was into the pandemic before it was the son that I was talking about, who has his own YouTube channel, that he's watching me struggling with all these stacks of CDs because I'm a big music fan. He's like, Dad, why don't you just get a Spotify account? And my mind couldn't process it because I used to pay $27.99 for a CD for one song. You want me to subscribe to this thing and I can get like almost every song ever? So I'm still a little bit behind the curve on AI, but I'm excited about it. I think it's going to amplify and magnify kind of what's already there.
Why would you call a cab when you can have an Uber? Why go to the mall when you have Amazon? Why write a blog when you have ChatGPT? It's like, and that's another argument. That's another discussion, but for another day.
Yeah.
Kevin, this has been awesome. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
NoScheduleMan.com. Got everything there about me, my speaking, our NSM Brand Media group, and our Little Engine small business support community is all on there.
Awesome. Kevin, you've been awesome. Thanks for your time.
Great talking to you, Jay. Thanks for the invite.
Hey, thank you, podcast listener, for checking out that episode of Drop the Mic. If you liked that episode, I would love it if you went on over to your podcast platform and left us a 5-star review. And if you don't want to miss an upcoming episode of Drop the Mic, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.